The worst day of her life did not start with violence. It started with a baby screaming, and no one was coming. In a mansion guarded by power and fear, an infant was left crying until her body began to fail. Everyone looked away. Everyone, except the foreign maid who had already buried her own child. She broke every rule to save that baby, and in doing so, she marked herself as a weakness in a world that kills weaknesses. But what happens when the most dangerous man in Seoul realizes the only thing keeping his daughter alive is the woman his family wants gone? And what happens when saving her means choosing love over power? Stay with this story, because what begins as survival turns into obsession, betrayal, and a love that puts a target on both their backs. This is not just a love story. It is a story about what power cannot protect, and who you become when love becomes the most dangerous thing you own. Welcome to Afro-Korean Drama TV. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories. Your support is really appreciated. The crying started as a thin, stubborn sound that refused to fade. It bounced off marble and glass, slipping through the Park mansion like an alarm nobody wanted to claim. A security guard paused outside the nursery, then kept walking. A nurse checked her phone, then told herself the night staff would handle it. In this house, mistakes were punished, and questions were dangerous. Still, the crying climbed higher, turning ragged, urgent, wrong. It went on long enough that the air itself felt tense, as if the mansion was holding its breath. Across the service corridor, Amara Cole stopped beside a linen cart. She had only been in Seoul for a short time, but she already understood the rules. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not look at the boss too long. Do not step into family spaces without permission. Amara followed those rules because she had no safety net and nowhere to return to. But the sound coming from the nursery was not just noise. It was panic. It pulled at something deep in her chest, the part of her that still woke up reaching for a baby who was no longer there. Amara left the cart and moved quietly through the hallway, keeping her head down as cameras tracked her. When she reached the nursery door, she hesitated. One wrong step could end her job, her visa, everything. The crying hit a new pitch, and her hesitation snapped. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room smelled like expensive lotion and warm milk. But there was another scent too, sharp and bitter. Baby Yura lay twisted in the crib, her tiny body jerking in frightening bursts. Her skin shone with fever. Foam dampened her lips. A bottle rested near her hand. Amara's heart hammered as she lifted Yura. The baby's eyes did not focus. Amara's fingers brushed the bottle nipple, and the bitter smell rose again, wrong in a way her body recognized before her mind could label it. Her hands shook as she pressed Yura to her shoulder, trying to calm her, trying to find a solution in seconds. The baby's cries cracked into weak, broken sounds. Amara thought of her own daughters last night, the helplessness, the way time had moved too fast. She refused to watch another baby slip away. Amara did not have a plan. She had instinct and grief, and a fierce need to fix what was breaking in her arms. She sat on the floor, bracing Yura carefully, and guided her to feed. The baby latched with a desperate urgency that made Amara's eyes burn. Yura's trembling did not stop instantly, but it slowed. Her breathing steadied in small increments. The crying softened. Amara whispered comfort in the only language that felt natural in that moment, a low lullaby from home, the kind mothers sing when fear tries to swallow the room. The nursery door swung open hard enough to rattle the frame. Footsteps followed, quick and heavy. Junseok Park entered like a storm-made human, tall, sharply dressed even at this hour, his presence turning the air colder. Two men trailed behind him, trained to scan corners and read threats. Junseok's eyes locked onto the scene on the floor. his infant daughter against a maid's chest, the maid feeding her. A line crossed that could not be uncrossed. His gaze was not just anger. It was shock, confusion, and something sharper he did not allow himself to name. For a moment, nobody moved. The men behind him tensed, ready to pull Amara away. Junseok lifted a hand, and they froze. His control was absolute. He stepped closer, eyes cutting from Amara's face to Yura's slack little hand to the bottle on the carpet. He crouched, picked it up, and his jaw tightened at the smell. He stood again, voice low, dangerous. He asked who prepared it. He asked why the baby had been screaming so long. The answers were useless. No one wanted to take responsibility. Junseok's eyes narrowed and the room filled with the quiet of incoming consequences. Doctors arrived within minutes, called by someone who finally chose fear of death over fear of blame. The lead physician moved fast, checking Yura's temperature, shining a light into her eyes, ordering tests in crisp Korean. Amara tried to stand, but her legs shook. A nurse glanced at her with disbelief and judgment, then focused back on the baby. Junseok watched the medical team with the patience of a predator. His gaze flicked to Amara again. He should have ordered her out. He should have punished the audacity. Instead, he heard the faint, steady sounds of Yura breathing and saw the baby's fingers clutching the fabric of Amara's uniform. The doctor confirmed what Junseok already suspected. Something toxic had been introduced into the formula. The words landed like a verdict. The room shifted from panic into strategy. Junseok gave quiet orders. Lock down the staff. Pull surveillance footage. Call his private security chief. No sirens. No police. He would handle it inside his own walls. He did. Not raise his voice, but every instruction carried weight. When the doctor said the baby would likely survive because she was stabilized quickly, Junseok's gaze tightened, and he looked at Amara as if she had become both problem and solution in the same breath. By the next morning, the mansion did not feel like a home. It felt like a fortress under investigation. Staff were separated, questioned, watched. Cameras were reviewed in a secure room where monitors glowed in a row like silent witnesses. Junseok sat at the center, composed, unreadable, while his men moved like shadows around him. On the screen, the nanny entered the nursery with measured calm. Minutes later, she left. After that, the baby's cries continued, and nobody came. Junseok's hand tightened on the armrest as the timeline built itself. Neglect, tampering, intent. Across the property, Amara sat alone in a small staff office with her hands clasped in her lap. Someone had given her water and told her to wait. No one told her what would happen next. Her mind kept replaying the moment she walked into the nursery. The sound, the foam, the fear. She knew she had broken rules that were not written down because they did not need to be. She also knew she could not regret saving a child. Still, dread crawled up her spine. She was new here. Foreign. Easy to blame. She imagined being sent away in disgrace, imagined being escorted out like a criminal. A guard finally opened the door and told her the boss wanted to see her. Amara stood, smoothing her uniform with trembling fingers, and followed him through hallways that seemed longer than before. She was led to a private study lined with dark wood and cold art. Junseok stood by the window, soul spread beneath him like a city he owned. He did not turn immediately. When he spoke, his voice was controlled and quiet. He asked her name, her background, why she acted the way she did. Amara answered carefully, choosing honesty because lies would not survive his eyes. He asked about her child, and the question hit her like a shove. Amara's throat tightened. She told him her baby died suddenly, that she came to Korea to work because staying home felt like drowning. She did not cry. She had cried enough to empty herself. Junseok's gaze stayed on her face, as if searching for a crack that would reveal deception. Instead, he found grief that looked real and heavy. His jaw flexed once. He told her she should not have been in that room. He told her she crossed a boundary. Then he said something that shocked her more than anger would have. He said, "If you did not act, my daughter would be gone." Later that afternoon, Yura remained under observation in a private hospital wing owned and protected by the park network. Jun Seok visited without entourage, moving through the corridor with the quiet authority that made nurses step aside instinctively. His baby lay small and pale against crisp sheets, wires tracking her tiny body, like a fragile promise. The doctor spoke softly about recovery and risk. Jun Seok listened, but his eyes stayed on Yura's face. He did not touch her at first. Then he placed a careful hand on her blanket, as if afraid contact would shatter whatever was keeping her alive. Outside the room, Jun Seok's phone buzzed with updates. His security chief reported offshore transfers, suspicious accounts, and a pattern that pointed to a rival syndicate. That part was predictable. Rivals wanted leverage, enemies wanted blood. What was not predictable was the next report. The nanny confessed in fragments under pressure. She did not just name the rival syndicate. She named a man who should have been family. Min Cheol, Jun Seok's uncle. A respected elder within the organization. A man who smiled at dinner tables while planning to erase a child. That evening, the mansion hosted a different kind of gathering. Not a party. Not a family meal. A closed-door meeting with elders, advisors, and men, who spoke in careful tones because the room carried history and threat. Jun Seok sat at the head of the table while his mother sat to his right, elegant and severe. When the subject of the maid came up, the atmosphere tightened. His mother called it shameful, not because the baby was nearly killed, but because a foreign employee fed the boss's child. She said people would talk. She said rivals would mock him. She said softness would spread like disease. Jun Seok's uncle Min Cheol sat across from him with practiced calm, wearing concern like a mask. He spoke about stability and image. He suggested removing the maid for the good of the family. He suggested controlling the narrative. His words were smooth, but Jun Seok heard the hunger underneath. Jun Seok's eyes stayed on Min Cheol's face, steady and cold. He did not accuse him yet. Not in this room. Not without the final piece of proof. Instead, he said the investigation was ongoing and the house would obey new rules until he said otherwise. Amara was told to remain in a staff room that night. 2 guards stayed outside her door, which did not feel like protection. It felt like captivity. She tried to sleep, but her body refused. She kept seeing Yura's convulsing limbs. She kept hearing the boss's voice, calm and cutting. She did not know if she was safe or if she was being held until someone chose what to do with her. When she finally drifted into shallow sleep, she dreamed of her own daughter's face and woke with tears on her cheeks she did not remember shedding. The next morning, the nurse in charge of Yura's case called Jun Seok with urgent news. The baby was rejecting bottles again. She cried and thrashed whenever someone tried to feed her. She calmed only when she heard a certain lullaby from a hallway speaker that captured the audio from the previous night. The doctor used a word that made Jun Seok's grip tighten on the phone. Attachment. The baby, too young to speak, was already forming a bond strong enough to affect her body. Jun Seok stared out at the city, then gave an order he had never given before. Bring the maid to the hospital, quietly. An hour later, Amara sat in the back of a black car, hands folded, eyes fixed on the tinted window. The guard beside her did not speak. The driver did not glance back. Seoul moved past in clean lines of morning traffic, cafes opening, people living normal lives under skies that did not care about syndicates or secrets. Amara's stomach twisted. If they were taking her to the hospital, it meant Yura needed her. That thought warmed her for a second, then fear flooded in. If the baby needed her, Jun Seok could decide she belonged to him now. In the hospital corridor, Amara heard Yura's crying again, thinner now, exhausted. She stepped into the room and froze at the sight of the baby's face crumpled in distress. The nurse looked at Amara with reluctance, then nodded. Amara moved close, careful, gentle, and lifted. Yura the way she had the first night. The baby's body eased against her as if she recognized safety. Yura's fists unclenched slowly. The crying broke into hiccuping breaths, then faded. The monitor's numbers smoothed out. The doctor watched, surprised despite himself. Junseok stood in the doorway, seeing it with his own eyes. He should have felt relief. He did, but it came mixed with something else. Possession, jealousy. A sharp, irrational edge that had nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with the fact that his child settled for someone else in a way she did not settle for him. His gaze moved to Amara's face, to the softness she tried to hide, to the way she looked at Yura like a promise. Junseok's chest tightened. He told himself it was only because he needed control of the situation. Amara looked up and met his eyes. For a second, she felt the force of him like a physical pressure. She lowered her gaze quickly, reminding herself of her place. But when she looked down again, Yura's fingers were curled into her sleeve, holding on. Amara's throat tightened. She whispered a calming phrase to the baby and tried not to think about what it meant that she was becoming necessary inside a world that did not forgive necessity. If you are enjoying this story so far, subscribe and like right now. Because the moment Junseok realized his daughter would not let Amara go, he also realized he might not let her go either. And the next decision he makes will change all three of their lives. Junseok stepped into the room and spoke to the doctor in a low voice. He asked what would happen if Amara left again. The doctor chose his words carefully. He said the baby's stress response could worsen. He said feeding issues could return. He said the safest course was stability. Junseok nodded slowly, eyes fixed on Yura's face. Then he looked at Amara again, and his voice turned colder. He told her she would return to the mansion, but her duties would change. She would stay near Yura at all times. She would not leave the property without permission. It was said like a medical plan, but it felt like a cage. Amara's heart dropped. She tried to keep her voice steady as she asked if she had a choice. Junseok's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in calculation. He said the choice was between her safety inside his protection and her vulnerability outside it. He did not say the word threat. He did not need to. Amara understood what kind of men he dealt with. She thought about Min Cheol's gaze, the way the house whispered about her, the way she had become a symbol overnight. Her instincts told her running would be dangerous. Her pride told her staying would be worse. Still, Yura's tiny hand clenched, and the decision slid out of Amara's control. That night, the mansion prepared a new room without announcing it to anyone. Not a staff room, not a guest room. A suite near the nursery with a lock that only certain people could open. When Amara arrived, she found clean clothes laid out, and a phone placed neatly on the bedside table, the kind meant for internal use. A female staff supervisor explained the new rules with a stiff smile. Amara would remain within the family wing. She would eat when permitted. She would sleep in that suite. She would respond immediately if Yura cried. It was framed as trust. It felt like surveillance. Across the hall, Junseok stood with his security chief, watching guards take new positions. The chief asked if keeping Amara so close would create gossip. Junseok's gaze stayed hard. He said gossip could be managed. Risk could not. He told the chief to increase vetting on all staff, to watch Min Cheol's movements, and to identify every contact linked to the rival syndicate. His voice did not change. Still, something inside him was already changing. He had broken a rule by bringing a stranger into the center of his home. He had broken another by admitting she was necessary. He told himself it was only for Yura. He did not trust the other reason. Amara lay awake in her new room, listening to the quiet of a mansion that never truly slept. She could hear distant footsteps, the soft hum of security radios, the muted click of doors. She pressed her palm to her chest and tried to slow her breathing. She told herself she was here for the baby. She told herself she would keep her head down and survive. But her mind kept returning to the moment in the hospital when Junseok looked at her. Not like a boss looking at a worker. Like a man measuring a threat to his control. Like a man fighting an emotion he did not want. In the nursery, Yura slept for the first time in days, peaceful against Amara's shoulder. Amara watched the baby's face and whispered a promise she did not know if she could keep. She promised she would not abandon her. She promised she would stay until Yura was safe. Then she thought about how dangerous promises were in this house, especially promises that tied her to Junseok Park. Outside the nursery door, Junseok paused, hand on the frame, listening to the silence. He should have felt satisfied. Instead, he felt restless, protective in a way that did not stop at his daughter. He pictured Mincheol's calm smile. He pictured rival hands reaching for leverage. He pictured Amara walking out of his gates and disappearing into a city that could swallow her whole. His jaw clenched. He told himself he was only thinking like a leader. But as he turned away, he realized he was thinking like a man who had started to want something he had no right to want. Morning came with a pale winter sun that made Seoul look clean from a distance. Inside the park mansion, the air stayed tense, as if the walls remembered the night of poison and refused to relax. Amara woke to a soft knock. A female staff supervisor entered with a tray and a reminder of rules. Yura's schedule was posted like a contract. Feeding, soothing, nap windows, medical, checks. Amara listened quietly, then nodded. She did not argue, because arguing was for people with power. Downstairs, Junseok met his security chief in a surveillance room that smelled like coffee and electronics. Screens showed the gates, corridors, staff entrances. Junseok watched a replay of the nanny's movements again, then asked about offshore payments. The chief reported new findings. The money path led to a chain of shell companies tied to the rival syndicate. But there was a local middleman too. Someone in Seoul had coordinated the drop. Someone who moved comfortably between social classes. Junseok's eyes narrowed. He told his chief to bring the middleman in for questioning, and to do it quietly. Seoul was full of ears. By late morning, Amara carried Yura through the nursery, bouncing her gently. The baby's warmth against her shoulder felt like both comfort and responsibility. Yura's fingers gripped Amara's sleeve as if the fabric was a lifeline. A nurse arrived to check vitals and gave Amara a look that was not friendly. The nurse asked if Amara understood boundaries. Amara answered with politeness and kept her gaze on Yura. The nurse left without softening. In the hallway, two staff members whispered as Amara passed. They stopped the moment they noticed the camera above them. Amara pretended she did not hear, but the words stuck anyway. Outsider. Dangerous. Shameless. She pressed her lips together and kept walking. She had heard worse back home. Here, the difference was that whispers could turn into decisions made by people who carried authority like weapons. That afternoon, Junseok returned from the hospital with a sealed folder of medical notes. He walked into the family wing and found Amara in the nursery chair, Yura asleep against her chest. For a second, he stayed still. He had seen countless quiet scenes in his life, but none of them had made him feel unsettled the way this did. The baby looked peaceful, safe. The woman, holding her, looked exhausted and stubborn and strangely fearless. Junseok stepped closer, and a floorboard creaked. Amara's eyes lifted instantly. She tensed, then forced herself to relax. Junseok noticed how fast she reacted, like someone trained by hardship. He asked softly enough that it almost felt private if Yura had eaten. Amara answered that she had, and that Yura settled better when the lights were dim. Junseok nodded. He did not thank her. Gratitude was a weakness in his world. Still, his gaze lingered. A sharp voice cut through the quiet. Junseok's mother appeared at the nursery door in a fitted coat, hair pinned perfectly, expression cold. She did not look at Amara as a person. She looked at her as a stain on tradition. She asked Junseok why the maid was in the family wing. Junseok said the doctor recommended stability for Yura. His mother replied that stability did not require disgrace. She suggested hiring a wet nurse from a reputable Korean family. She said outsiders did not belong near the Park bloodline. Amara lowered her eyes and tightened her hold on the baby. Junseok's jaw hardened. He told his mother the discussion was over. His mother stared at him, then at Amara. She said Min Cheol would not approve. Junseok's gaze sharpened at the mention of his uncle. He told his mother that Min Cheol did not make decisions anymore, not in matters concerning Yura. His mother left the doorway with a stiff, controlled anger that promised consequences. The next day moved like a controlled storm. Amara stayed close to Yura, as ordered, but she felt the mansion shifting against her. Staff corrected her more often, not because she broke rules, but because they wanted her to feel small. A male guard outside the nursery started watching her with open suspicion. Another staff member bumped her in the corridor and murmured an apology that did not sound real. On the other side of the property, Junseok's men brought the local middleman into a private room above a quiet restaurant. The man wore expensive streetwear and pretended to be amused. He tried to negotiate. He tried to joke. Junseok did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He set a phone on the table and played a recording. The middleman's voice, arranging delivery, naming contacts, confirming payment. The man's smile faltered. Junseok asked who hired him. The man hesitated, then said he was paid to pass a vial to the nanny through a staff supplier. He swore he did not know it was poison. Junseok leaned forward slightly and asked again. The middleman's eyes darted. He finally named a person. A stylist who worked with elite women, someone who attended charity events and knew how to move through the park circle without being questioned. Junseok stayed still, absorbing it. A social bridge, a way to get close without triggering alarm. He understood. He also understood that Min Cheol loved indirect methods. Junseok told his men to keep the middleman alive and hidden. Then he left the room with a calm that frightened everyone inside it. That evening, Junseok returned to the mansion and found Amara in the kitchen area reserved for staff. She was heating water for Yura's bottle, moving quietly, trying to avoid attention. Junseok's presence made the room go silent. Everyone lowered their eyes. Amara froze for half a second, then bowed her head. Junseok watched her, then told the staff supervisor that Amara would now eat in the family wing. The supervisor blinked, shocked. Amara lifted her gaze slightly, alarm flickering across her face. Junseok did not look at anyone else. He told Amara to follow him. It was not a request. Amara followed because the alternative did not exist. She carried Yura with her, stepping into a corridor she was never supposed to walk through. The mansion felt different on this side. Quieter, cleaner, more expensive, more guarded. Amara's heart pounded as she entered the family dining room. Junseok's mother sat at the table. Min Cheol was there too, dressed in a polished suit, smiling like a man who enjoyed watching people struggle. Amara's stomach dropped. Min Cheol's eyes slid over her slowly as if measuring her worth. Junseok took his seat without acknowledging the tension. He gestured for Amara to sit on a chair slightly behind him, close enough to soothe Yura if she woke. The meal began with polite conversation that felt like a test. Min Cheol asked Amara where she was from. He asked what brought her to Korea. He asked about her qualifications, her past work, her education. He spoke in Korean, knowing she understood enough to feel the pressure but not enough to counter it easily. Amara answered carefully in Korean that was respectful, but not weak. Min Cheol smiled wider. He said her Korean was impressive for someone new. His tone made it sound like praise, but his eyes held something darker. Junseok interrupted and told Min Cheol to focus on business, not his staff. Min Cheol lifted his hands in a calm gesture. He said he cared because the family's reputation was at stake. He suggested that Yura's attachment to Amara could be used against them. He suggested that enemies would enjoy the story. Junseok's grip tightened on his chopsticks. He said enemies would be dealt with. Min Cheol's smile did not fade. He said dealing with enemies was easier when there were no weak points. Amara kept her face neutral, but inside she felt the warning. Weak point. That was what she had become. She focused on Yura's breathing, on the baby's warmth, on staying composed. Junseok's mother spoke again, saying a foreign maid should know her place. Junseok looked at his mother and said the place he assigned was the place she would keep. The room went colder. When the meal ended, Min Cheol stood, adjusted his cuffs, and leaned slightly toward Amara as he passed. He spoke in English, smooth and quiet. He said Amara should be careful in houses like this, because kindness could be misunderstood as ambition. Amara's throat tightened. She wanted to step back, but she stayed still. Junseok's eyes tracked Min Cheol's movement like a blade. Later that night, Amara was in the nursery, rocking Yura in the dim light. Her mind replayed Min Cheol's English words. She told herself she was imagining threats. She told herself she was tired. Still, she felt watched. She heard a soft click at the nursery door and turned sharply. Junseok stepped inside and closed it behind him. He did not speak immediately. His gaze went to Yura, then to Amara. He asked if Min Cheol said anything to her. Amara hesitated, then told him exactly what Min Cheol said. Junseok's expression turned hard. He told Amara that if anyone approached her in a way that made her uneasy, she should report it directly to him. Amara asked why he cared, and the question slipped out before she could stop it. Junseok's eyes flicked to her face. He said he cared because his daughter needed her. His voice sounded steady, but his gaze did not. It lingered on her mouth for a fraction too long. Amara felt it and looked away quickly. Her heart thumped, as if her body recognized danger that did not look like danger. The next morning, Junseok ordered additional security around the family wing. He also assigned one of his most loyal men, a quiet driver named Tae-hyun, to escort Amara whenever she moved outside the nursery area. Amara did not like it. It felt like being followed. She told herself it was protection. She told herself it was necessary. Still, every time the guards shifted, she felt the weight of being owned by circumstance. By midday, a hospital follow-up was required. Yura needed blood work, and the doctor insisted on a controlled environment. Junseok chose to accompany them himself. The convoy rolled through Seoul like a private shadow, black cars sliding past cafes and office towers. Amara sat in the back, seat with Yura, facing Junseok across the leather interior. The space felt too small for the tension between them. At a stoplight, a motorbike eased too close to the convoy. Tae-hyun's posture changed instantly. Junseok's eyes narrowed. The bike rider glanced toward the back window. Amara's breath caught. The car moved forward. The bike followed for half a block, then peeled away. It was nothing. It was also not nothing. Junseok stared out the window as if mapping threats from reflections. At the hospital, staff stepped aside the moment they recognized the park security detail. Amara kept Yura close, trying to appear calm. In the hallway, a young female nurse approached and greeted Junseok with bright familiarity. She spoke quickly, smiling, eyes shining. She asked about Yura, then glanced at Amara with a look that was half curiosity, half judgment. Junseok responded politely, then turned away, dismissing the nurse with a nod. The nurse lingered, trying to keep his attention. Amara told herself it was nothing, but something hot and sharp rose in her chest. Jealousy was an ugly word. Amara did not want to claim it. Still, the nurse's smile felt like a challenge, and Amara hated that she noticed. After the checkup, they walked back toward the elevator. Yura began to fuss. Amara shifted her, whispering soothing words. Junseok stepped closer to help, reaching for Yura's blanket. In the narrow elevator entry, Amara turned at the same time Junseok moved. Her shoulder brushed his chest. The contact was brief, but it felt like a spark across skin. Amara's breath hitched. Junseok's hand caught her elbow instinctively, steadying her. His grip was firm, warm, too intimate. Their eyes met. The elevator doors slid open behind them, but neither moved for a second. Amara swallowed and tried to step back. Junseok's hand tightened slightly, not enough to hurt, just enough to keep her close. Then Yura grabbed the front of Amara's blouse and tugged hard. Amara stumbled forward, trying to keep Yura safe. Her mouth brushed Junseok's jawline by accident. It was quick. It was clumsy. It was nothing and everything at the same time. Amara froze, face burning, pulse racing. Junseok went still. His eyes darkened and his grip stayed on her elbow a heartbeat longer than necessary. Amara pulled back sharply and looked away, mortified. She mumbled an apology and tried to focus on Yura. Junseok said nothing. His silence was worse than anger. The elevator ride felt endless. Amara stared at the floor and told herself it was an accident. She told herself he did not notice. She told herself she did not feel the way her skin still hummed. In the car afterward, Amara kept her gaze fixed on the window. Her mind replayed the moment again and again, twisting it into shame. She was staff. He was the boss. She was foreign. He was power. Nothing good could come from a mistake like that. Still, her body kept remembering the warmth of his hand on her arm, the steady strength in his posture, the way he did not let her fall. Junseok watched her without letting his expression change. His jaw was tight. His thoughts were colder than he liked. He did not like accidents. He did not like losing control. He did not like that his body reacted before his mind did. He also did not like the nurse's attention earlier, not because he cared about the nurse, but because he saw Amara's subtle tension and realized she noticed. The realization pleased him in a way that made him angry with himself. That evening, back at the mansion, Junseok met his security chief again. The chief reported that the stylist linked to the poison network had disappeared from her apartment. Phones were off, bank accounts frozen. It was a flight, which meant someone warned her. Junseok's eyes turned colder. He asked who had access to the investigation details. The chief listed a short set of names. Mincheol's name was not said, but it hung in the air anyway. Night fell, and the mansion turned quiet again. Amara bathed Yura and changed her into soft pajamas, then carried her into the nursery chair. She tried to calm her thoughts, but the elevator moment clung to her like a secret she could not scrub off. She felt guilty for thinking about it at all. She felt guilty for the flutter in her chest when she remembered Junseok's eyes. A knock came at the nursery door. Amara stiffened. Taehyun opened it slightly and told her the boss wanted to see her in his study. Amara's stomach tightened. She did not want to face him. She also knew she had no choice. She settled Yura into the crib and walked across the hall. Junseok's study was dim, lit by one lamp. He stood by a shelf, not seated, as if he had been pacing. He looked at Amara, and the silence between them carried the weight of the accident neither mentioned. He asked if she was adjusting. Amara answered that she was doing her job. Junseok stepped closer and said her job had changed. He said she was now part of the Park family's inner circle whether she wanted it or not. He said that made her a target. Amara asked what that meant. Junseok's voice stayed calm. He told her it meant she would move with guards. It meant her phone calls would be monitored for safety. It meant she would not go anywhere alone. Amara's eyes flashed with frustration. She said she came to work, not to be trapped. Junseok's gaze hardened. He said quietly that traps were built by enemies, not by him. He said he was keeping her alive. Amara's throat tightened. She wanted to argue. She also remembered the motorbike, the disappearing stylist, Min Cheol's English warning. She lowered her eyes and asked what he wanted from her. Junseok's gaze moved over her face as if he could see her fear and her defiance at the same time. He said he wanted her to keep Yura stable. He said he wanted her to tell him if anyone tried to reach her. Then he added something, softer, almost reluctant. He said he wanted her to stop blaming herself for saving his child. Amara looked up, surprised. Their eyes locked. The room felt too close again. Amara's breath caught as she realized she was noticing details she should not notice. The faint scent of clean cologne, the steady depth of his voice, the controlled intensity that made him dangerous and safe at once. She stepped back instinctively, but the movement brought her close to the desk, trapping her between Wood and him. Junseok noticed and did not move away. His gaze dropped briefly to her lips, then back to her eyes. The air tightened. Amara's heart raced. She thought of rules. She thought of consequences. She thought of how wrong it would be to want anything here. She whispered that she should go back to Yura. Junseok did not stop her, but his voice followed her like a tether. He told her to lock her door tonight. Amara returned to the nursery with her pulse still uneven. She locked the suite, ducked her behind her and leaned against it for a moment, eyes closed, trying to steady herself. She told herself it was fear, not attraction. She told herself she was reacting to danger. She told herself she did not want him. Across the hall, Junseok stood in the dark corridor, listening to the soft click of Amara's lock. His jaw clenched. He told himself he was only watching because threats were closing in. Still, as he walked away, his thoughts returned to the brief contact in the elevator, the warmth of her near kiss, the way she flushed and tried to hide it. He felt something possessive tighten in his chest. He did not like it. He did not stop it. If you are still here, subscribe and like now. Because the enemies around them are not the only danger anymore. The real danger is that Junseok is starting to want Amara close, for reasons that have nothing to do with the baby. And the next move Min Cheol makes will force Junseok to choose between the rules that built him and the woman, who is breaking them. By midnight, a quiet alarm pinged in the security room. A perimeter sensor near the garden wall registered movement. Not an animal, not wind. A human shape, quick and deliberate. Guards shifted positions. Radios crackled softly. Junseok was notified within seconds. He moved through the mansion without a sound, dressed in dark clothes, eyes sharp. His security chief met him near the back corridor and whispered that someone attempted to breach the garden line, then retreated. A test. A warning. Junseok's face stayed calm, but inside, fury rose. They were getting closer. They were learning the mansion's rhythms. Junseok turned and looked toward the family wing, toward the nursery where his daughter slept, and the woman who held his child's calm in her arms. He gave a quiet order. Double security on that corridor. No exceptions. In Amara's room, she lay awake anyway, staring at the ceiling, listening to distant footsteps and radios. She hugged the blanket tighter and tried to breathe. She told herself she would survive this. She told herself she would not fall into feelings she could not afford. Then, from the nursery, Yura made a soft sound in her sleep, and Amara rose instantly, moving to the crib without thinking. She lifted the baby and whispered comfort until the tiny body relaxed again. Amara pressed her cheek briefly to Yura's head, then stared at the shadowed doorway, as if she could sense the mansion watching her. Outside, the city kept shining. Inside, the Park household edged closer to a storm. And in the quiet space between duty and desire, Amara began to realize that the most dangerous place in this mansion was not outside the gates. It was inside her own heart. Before we go any further, pause for 1 second. If you are enjoying this story, like and subscribe now, because what happens next is where everything breaks. The rules, the walls, the distance between them. And once it happens, there is no turning back. The first sign that something was wrong came just after dawn. Amara woke to silence that felt unnatural. The mansion usually breathed at night with quiet footsteps and low radio murmurs. This silence was thick, deliberate. Her instincts sharpened instantly. She rose from the bed and crossed to the nursery, heart already racing. Yura slept peacefully, chest rising and falling, fingers curled near her cheek. Relief washed over Amara for half a second, then vanished when she noticed the curtain by the window shifting slightly, even though the glass was closed. Amara froze. She stood very still, listening. There was a soft scrape outside, careful, controlled. Not staff. Not wind. Her pulse thundered. She lifted Yura gently and moved backward, pressing the baby against her chest. Her hand shook as she reached for the internal phone Junseok had placed beside the crib. Before she could dial, the nursery door opened quietly. Junseok stepped inside, already alert, already dangerous. His gaze flicked from Amara to the window, then back to her face. He did not ask if she was all right. He already knew. He crossed the room in 2 long strides and pulled the curtain aside just enough to look out. 2 guards were visible below, weapons drawn, scanning the garden perimeter. "It was a test," he said calmly. "They wanted to see how fast we react." Amara's breath came uneven. "They are getting closer." "Yes," he said, "and that means you are no longer safe in this wing." Her stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "It means you are moving." Before she could ask where, he stepped closer and reached for Yura. Amara hesitated, then handed the baby over. The contact forced them close again, her fingers brushing his wrist. Junseok felt it. He always did. His jaw tightened, and he turned away before the moment could stretch into something worse. Within minutes, the mansion shifted into controlled motion. Guards repositioned, lights adjusted, doors locked and unlocked in precise sequence. Amara followed Junseok down a corridor she had never been allowed to enter before. This wing was deeper, more secure, closer to Junseok's private quarters. Her heart pounded as realization settled in. "You are staying here," he said, opening a door that led into a suite connected directly to his own room. Amara stopped walking. "With you?" "Near me," he corrected, "where I can protect you." Her fear flared into anger. "That is not protection. That is control." Junseok turned, eyes dark. "Those 2 things look the same from the outside." She hugged herself, fighting the urge to step back. "You cannot just decide this." "I already did," he said quietly. The room felt too small for the tension between them. Yura stirred in his arms, making a small sound. Amara's anger softened despite herself. She stepped forward and reached for the baby automatically. Junseok watched her do it, watched the way his daughter settled instantly when Amara held her. The sight stirred something raw in his chest. "You do not trust me," Amara said softly. "I trust you with my daughter," he replied. "That is not the same thing." She swallowed. "Then why does it feel like you are locking me in?" "Because danger does not ask permission," he said. "And neither do I." That night, Amara slept on the far side of the suite, fully dressed, nerves stretched tight. She could hear Junseok moving in the connected room, measured footsteps, controlled pacing. She told herself she was afraid of the situation. She did not want to admit she was also aware of him, too aware, as if proximity itself was changing the air. The next day brought more tension. Junseok left early for a meeting with senior lieutenants. Amara stayed behind with Yura, watched closely by guards who pretended not to watch her. She tried to focus on routine, feeding, soothing, singing softly. Still, her thoughts kept circling back to the suite, to the fact that there was now only one locked door between her and the most dangerous man she had ever known. By afternoon, news reached the mansion. The stylist linked to the poison network had been found. Not alive. The message was clear. Someone was cleaning up loose ends. Junseok returned home with violence written into the stillness of his face. He summoned his security chief and issued orders that made the air turn sharp. That evening, Amara overheard raised voices through the corridor. Min Cheol had arrived unannounced. She was in the suite with Yura when the door opened and Min Cheol stepped inside without knocking. His smile was thin, controlled. The guards outside hesitated just long enough to let him pass. "So this is where you are hiding," he said, eyes sweeping over the room, then settling on Amara. Amara stiffened. "I am not hiding." Min Cheol chuckled softly. "You are braver than you look." Before she could respond, Junseok appeared in the doorway, his presence cutting the room in half. "You should not be here." Min Cheol turned slowly. "I wanted to see the woman who has my nephew breaking rules." Junseok stepped forward. "Leave." Min Cheol's gaze flicked between them, lingering on the space where Amara stood too close to Junseok. Understanding sparked, followed by amusement. "Be careful," he said lightly. "Women like this create stories. Stories weaken men." Junseok's control snapped just enough for Amara to feel it. He moved, fast, placing himself fully between Min Cheol and her. "You are done speaking to her." Min Cheol raised his hands. "Of course. Family matters." He paused at the door, then added softly, "Just remember who you were before her." When he left, the room felt like it had survived a storm. Amara's hands trembled. Junseok turned to her, his face tight with restrained fury. "He will not come near you again." "You cannot promise that," she said. "I can," he replied. That night, the tension between them reached a breaking point. Yura woke crying just after midnight. Amara rose quickly and moved to the crib. Junseok followed without a word. As Amara lifted the baby, Yura's small foot kicked, knocking a bottle from the bedside table. It shattered on the floor with a sharp crack. Amara gasped and stepped back instinctively, slipping on the slick surface. Junseok grabbed her, pulling her against his chest to steady her. The baby was safe, pressed between them. Amara's breath hitched as she realized how close they were, her face inches from his arm firm around her waist. Neither moved. The silence stretched. Amara could feel his heartbeat, slow and powerful. Her mind screamed at her to pull away. Her body refused. Junseok's gaze dropped to her lips again, darker this time, less controlled. "This is a mistake," Amara whispered. "Yes," he said quietly. "It is." He still did not let go. Yura made a soft sound, shifting. Amara looked down instinctively, and in that moment of distraction, Junseok leaned forward. His lips brushed her cheek, accidental at first, then lingering just long enough to no longer be one. Amara froze, shock and heat colliding in her chest. She pulled back sharply. "Do not." Junseok released her instantly, stepping away as if burned. His face closed off, walls slamming back into place. "Go back to bed," he said, voice flat. Amara carried Yura to the chair, hands shaking. Her heart raced, confusion tearing through her. She had felt it. The pull, the danger. She hated herself for it. She hated him for awakening it. Across the room, Junseok stood with his back to her, fists clenched. He had broken a rule he had never broken before. He had let desire outrun discipline, and he knew Min Cheol would exploit that weakness the moment he sensed it. The next day, the attack came without warning. A routine drive through the city turned violent in seconds. A truck swerved too close. Smoke filled the street. Guards shouted. Tires screeched. Amara screamed as the car jolted. Junseok shielded her and Yura with his body as gunfire cracked through the chaos. They escaped by inches. Back at the mansion, Junseok's decision was immediate. "You are leaving," he told Amara. "Tonight." Her chest tightened. "Where?" "Somewhere they cannot reach," he said. "Without me." The words hurt more than she expected. As guards prepared a decoy convoy, Amara packed in silence. She held Yura one last time, tears blurring her vision. Junseok watched from the doorway, his expression unreadable. When she turned to face him, he stepped closer. "This is not goodbye," he said. "It feels like one," she replied. He hesitated, then placed his hand over hers, firm and possessive. "Stay alive," he said quietly. "That is an order." She nodded, unable to speak. As the car pulled away into the night, Amara looked back at the mansion shrinking behind her, unaware that Min Cheol was already setting his next move in motion. And this time, the target was not the baby. Before the car had cleared the first checkpoint, the plan began to fail. If you are still here, like and subscribe now, because this is the moment everything collapses and is rebuilt in blood, choice, and love. What happens next decides who survives and who becomes untouchable. The convoy split exactly as ordered. One car veered toward the expressway with lights on and speed aggressive, a loud promise meant to pull eyes and attention. Amara's car slipped the opposite direction, quiet, guarded, controlled. She held Yura close, whispering comfort she barely felt herself. Her chest ached with the weight of leaving Junseok behind. She told herself separation was safety. She told herself distance would cool whatever dangerous pull had grown between them. She was wrong. The ambush came 3 blocks later. A delivery van drifted sideways at an intersection that should have been clear. Tires screamed, smoke canisters rolled under the chassis before anyone could shout a warning. The world turned gray and loud. Amara screamed Yura's name even though the baby was in her arms. The driver swerved. A door slammed open. Hands reached in through the smoke, fast and practiced. The guard beside Amara went down without a sound. Someone grabbed Amara's arm and tore her away from the seat. She fought, instinct wild, clutching Yura until another pair of hands pried the baby from her grip. Amara's scream ripped through her chest. She twisted, clawed, kicked. A hard blow knocked the air from her lungs. She heard Yura crying, then heard a man shout orders. The smoke thinned enough for Amara to see Yura being passed to another vehicle. Then the door slammed. The van sped off. By the time the smoke cleared, the street looked almost normal again. Almost. A fallen guard. Shattered glass. The echo of an infant's cry fading into distance. Back at the mansion, Junseok felt it before the call came. A sharp, instinctive pull in his chest, like a wire snapping. His phone rang. He answered without speaking. The security chief's voice was tight. Breached convoy. Baby recovered. Amara taken. The room went silent. Junseok closed his eyes for one breath. When he opened them, something in his expression had changed. The restraint he wore like armor fell away. He issued orders that cut through the house like steel. Lock the city down quietly. Seal exits. Trace vehicles. Wake everyone. He did not shout. He did not pace. He moved with lethal focus. Yura was brought to him minutes later, shaken but unharmed. Junseok took her into his arms, holding her tighter than he ever had. She cried, reaching, searching. She did not settle. She kept turning her head, whimpering, calling for a presence that was not there. Junseok's jaw clenched. Min Cheol's message arrived an hour later, delivered through a disposable phone. Calm, polite. He said Amara was safe for now. He said misunderstandings happened in families like theirs. He said Junseok should come alone if he wanted the woman returned intact. Junseok did not reply. He tracked the signal, triangulated the handoffs, mapped the pattern. Min Cheol favored places that looked abandoned but were easy to control. Old industrial zones, warehouses near rail lines, places where noise blended into the city's background. He chose one. Night fell heavy over the outskirts of Seoul. An old logistics warehouse stood dark against the skyline, windows boarded, doors chained. Inside, Amara sat on the concrete floor with her hands bound, pulse roaring in her ears. Her head ached, her ribs burned. She tasted fear like metal. She forced herself to breathe steadily because panic would help no one. Min Cheol entered without hurry, adjusting his coat. He crouched in front of her, studying her face. He said she was stronger than she looked. He said she caused more damage. Then she realized. He said Junseok had never bent this way for anyone. Amara lifted her chin despite the tremor in her body and told him to stop talking. Min Cheol smiled. He said she would be useful either way, as leverage or as a lesson. Outside, engines idled and went silent. Shadows moved. The first sound was not a shout or a warning. It was the lights dying. Darkness swallowed the warehouse. Then the noise came, controlled, precise. Guards fell in silence. Doors blew inward with concussive force that rattled Amara's bones. She screamed as men flooded the space, chaos erupting in sharp bursts of sound and movement. She dropped her head and curled inward, protecting herself as best she could. A familiar voice cut through everything. Low, commanding, furious. Junseok. Amara lifted her head just in time to see him reach her. He dropped to one knee, hands moving fast to cut her restraints. His eyes searched her face, her arms, her legs. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "I am fine," she said, voice shaking. "The baby. She is safe," he said immediately. Relief cracked through her chest so hard her eyes burned. Min Cheol's laughter echoed from the shadows. He stepped forward, gun raised, eyes alight. He said Junseok had finally revealed his weakness. He said love made men predictable. Junseok stood slowly, placing himself fully in front of Amara. His posture was calm, lethal. He told Min Cheol he was finished. Min Cheol fired. Junseok moved faster. The sound was deafening. When it ended, Min Cheol lay still on the concrete, his ambition finally silent. Junseok did not look at him again. He turned back to Amara and pulled her into his arms before she could stop herself. She broke. The strength she had held shattered, and she clutched his jacket, sobbing into his chest. Junseok held her like he would never let go, his hand firm at her back, his jaw pressed to her hair. In that moment, the world narrowed to breath and heartbeat and survival. Later, in the safety of the car, Amara sat wrapped in a coat too big for her. Junseok watched her with eyes that no longer hid anything. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "Sending you away did not protect you." She swallowed. "You cannot protect me from everything." "No," he agreed. "But I can choose you." The words landed heavy between them. Back at the mansion, dawn broke over walls that would never be the same. Junseok gathered his inner circle and spoke without hesitation. Min Cheol's betrayal was exposed. His authority ended. Loyalty was reaffirmed. Then Junseok did something no one expected. He brought Amara forward. He said she was under his protection. He said she was family. He said anyone who disrespected her answered to him. He did not ask permission. He did not explain. The declaration settled like law. Later, in the quiet of the family wing, Amara stood by the window, watching light creep into the city. Yura slept in her arms, calm and safe. Junseok joined her, standing close but not touching. "I never wanted this," Amara said softly. "This world." "I never wanted to need anyone," he replied. She turned to him, heart pounding. "We are a mistake." "Yes," he said. Then he reached for her, slow, giving her time to pull away. She did not. His hand cupped her face, gentle and deliberate. This time, when he kissed her, there was nothing accidental about it. It was careful, controlled, full of promise and danger. Amara trembled and kissed him back, then pulled away, breathless, conflicted, scared of how much she wanted this. "I am afraid," she admitted. "So am I," he said. "That is how I know it matters." Time passed. Healing was not instant, but it was real. Amara stayed, not as a maid, not as a prisoner, but as the woman who kept Yura safe and steady. Junseok learned how to be present, how to soften without losing strength. The mansion changed. Laughter replaced silence. Fear loosened its grip. Years later, Amara stood in a sunlit room filled with women and children, opening a foundation for mothers who had lost and survived. Junseok watched from the back, pride quiet but fierce. At home, he knelt to his daughter, listened to his wife, and slept without shadows at his door. If this story stayed with you, subscribe, like, and share. Because sometimes the darkest worlds are changed by the people brave enough to love inside them.